Oh, we got to stop dancing in the background.
Dude, I was getting down with that.
All right. Welcome to the return of the Senteon webinar series where we interview some industry experts. And today we're joined by Eric Taylor of Barricade Cyber. Brother, how are you?
Dude, I am just happy to be here. This has been a webinar, 8, 10 months in the making, but we just couldn't get our schedules to align.
You know, these shows and they don't tell you this when you go into entrepreneurship, let alone the MSP industry, but trade shows are tiring and I lost too much sleep and lost control of my schedule. But here in June, 8-10 months later, we're live. So to kick this off, a little new routine that I'm putting everyone on the spot to start off. As you might tell, I do live full-time in an RV. Eric,
down by the river.
Down by there. I should have just came running in from the background. So my kickoff, my icebreaker, so the audience gets to know you, brother. Why do you not live full-time in an RV down by the river?
It's really hard to transport a smoker in a camper.
Big smoker guy. That is one thing I want to do. As we get to drive to these trade shows, I do want to pull out a full smoker and do a little tailgate or post tailgate for some of these shows.
You're going to have a real hard time with that one.
We'll see how it goes. Coordinate with the hotels. But anywho, so today's episode will be the unseen forces behind incident response. So I know you have a background in IR and a little bit in forensics. The big reason I chose to reach out to you is when I talk about Senteon with configurations and change tracking and drift and enforcement, it was always somewhere I felt honestly a little weak in when I had questions from the MSP, from the business, like, why does this actually matter? Is this even important, like from a security point of view? And, getting to know you have pretty good broad scope of knowledge. So Eric, if you don't mind, introduce yourself and Barricade Cyber a little bit.
Sure. My name is Eric Taylor. I am the CEO, and what I have taken over, recoined the CFO, the analogy, instead of chief financial. I say I'm the chief forensic officer here. So we handle all the digital forensics and incident response cases over here at Barricade Cyber.
All right. And, incident response for and all of that, we talked like you are growing your business and you are marketing it. How can you do that if you only come into play after an incident, right? Is there anything you can really do to really promote yourself? Like how does an IR firm grow?
So it really is by awareness of knowing what's out there and proving that you have, quite frankly, the chops to hunt evil. And that's literally what we're doing is we're hunting evil. We go through logs. We try to find all the, the sassy stuff from the threat actors we're typically doing. A lot of them have their tried and true TTPs, their techniques, tactics, and procedures. So when you get a Hive ransomware, or you get a Cura, or you get, Lockbit, we pretty much know, and we're just going to confirm our initial assessments. Every once in a while, you'll have a make-believe threat actor, like when Lockbit had their source code released, leaked out. There was a lot of people pretending to be Lockbit, and it really wasn't. It was some other third party. So that always gives you a little bit of a curveball that you weren't expecting, especially when you're negotiating with one firm, and they give you the decryptor for Lockbit Black, and you're like, son of a bitch.
And you talked about stealing. Is this like stealing their signature, their TTPs? Like, how do you identify? I mean, just a high level, like, and for the audience, like, this is going to be a first round of probably 3 to 5 episodes, and we want to try to keep it high level here as we go deeper. But I can't overlook. How do you hunt this bad guy? How do you determine who it is? Is there pieces?
So I mean, while a lot of forensics firms do keep a lot of things close to the belt or close to the chest, if you will, like when a threat actor gets shut down, then you'll start seeing the reports like, oh, we had all this freaking intel. Well, I am thankfully, and member of several CTI groups, and we do openly share threat intel amongst each other.
Okay.
And so we are able to stay apprised of like, what is this other group, or what this essentially a competitor, but we're being friendly, just trying to make sure we're all on the same page for the most part.
Would you say that's normal, like for IR
Mm.
firms to all? Because I will say, like vendor world again, representing Senteon, like we always talk about integrations and complement how we complement each other, but a lot of the time for my scope, we never do the same exact thing. Like setting remediation is very different than what a lot of other players do. So with IR though, I mean, you guys are one-to-one competitors and it's still
Mhm.
friendly, or is that more of an anomaly?
It it really depends. The more mature forensics firms, we are friendly with each other because we understand that while we are in a slow period right now in terms of threat actor activity, we won't get into massive geopolitical topics here, but unless you want me to. But
I was
anyway,
gonna say
the
another episode. That would be a little tough. I don't think we can handle
um,
that in an unscheduled 60-minute cast.
but threat actor activity is down, but typically there is enough work to go around the credible firms, and so we do lean on each other a lot sometimes because we if we get overloaded, we may tap the shoulder of another firm. And
Yeah.
whether you have a white label relationship or a referral relationship, you at least know that you're passing a individual off to another credible firm instead of using some no-name startup. And you know, not to be ugly, but an MSP or MSSP pretending to do forensics.
That's one of the first slides, so don't go too deep into that. Well, one we'll hold off on until we share the screen. But and you talk about the no name startup IR forensics, and I'll post Chuck's question here in a moment. But you know, you were at one point a no name startup Barricade. How do you bridge the gap? Because if Senseon were to ever go through something, like I would want a very well known rapport brand. Like I wouldn't just go with a startup for something this serious. So how do you mature something like this?
It really is by proving your credibility, proving that like I said, you know what you're doing. You got to be able to showcase because a lot of times people will just go on Google and try to find a forensics firm, right?
Yep.
Not many people are staying in the know when it comes to threat intel, or who is the space. It's like it. Our world is not like your car manufacturer world or your home like your home grocery store. Like you have the people that you keep track of, like what's the latest thing that GM is doing, or Ford or
Yep.
Audi, or whatever the case is, right? um Very few people like, what is Barricade, what is Kroll, what is Cyber Reason, what is all these other firms
Yep.
doing, so if I ever need an issue, then we know who to call. So it's very, very few, far between. It really is about your social presence, unfortunately. And while it doesn't give you immediate ROI, it, to be to be quite honest, it really never gives you an ROI. It's just like, hey, we had a great discovery call with Barricade and the
Yep.
team over there. Let me go check them out on LinkedIn and check them a little bit further before I sign this engagement. Then they're like, oh, these guys actually know what the heck they're talking about. We can trust them to handle our matter.
I like that. And, even as we've grown and started to go into shows, and a lot of the advice we've gotten is, hey, it's not about trying to close deals at the show. It's not even about how many meetings you schedule. It really is just this non quantifiable exposure ROI type of thing. And, I got to meet you. So credit to the tech generates. We're both pretty active in that community. Talk a little bit on that about, getting involved with the community aspect and being in my point of view, one of like only two, maybe three people I know in the space. So you're kind of a little bit adjacent to a majority of that community. So how was it integrating and fitting in while you do something so unique?
So that is a so. All right, here we go. Strap in, ladies and gentlemen. So way back when I was a young lad, I went off to the United States Marine Corps and was counter military intel. I think Zach, you've heard about that, but
Yep.
got out and worked for Black Box, started up my own MSP. Really did not care for it and really wanted something different. Didn't know if I can actually go back into cyber because I got arrested by the FBI when I was 13 for hacking various government entities. And I didn't know if I could get back into it, right? So I was doing a lot of red teaming and stuff like that, and got brought in by several MSPs like, hey, you're over here doing this stuff. We know you did all this other stuff, and we want you to really take a look at this forensic thing. We see some weird logs over here that we could really use some help.
Mhm.
So that's really how I got into it. So the second part of your question is, how do I go through and be part of the community and give back? I am what you call an acquired taste. And I said all that before to say this, like, I am not a person who's going to sugarcoat things. I'm not going to be politically correct. I'm going to tell you, whether you like it or not, the real truth of the matter. Like, we literally had, and I'm full of ADHD, so we'll rant forever. And I told Zach this, we could go long if we need to.
That's probably the easiest thing of doing webinars with especially friends who have the same mindset. We could just go.
So those who don't know, I have the great honor and privilege of doing what's called jaw jacking, which is an Ask Me Anything for Dr. Gerald Dozier, Simply Cyber, that is every morning from 8 to 9 Eastern time. And on Tuesday, there was a participant saying, hey, how do I convince my dad to let me reconfigure the firewall? I have no experience. And I went on a 7-minute rant like, effing don't do it. And I had to go through like the whole thing.
Video.
Like, yeah, like I went through a whole rant, like, don't do this.
Yeah.
We had an organization several years ago that used KMS Pico to bypass Windows authentication. The owner got mad because he had VLK. He was paying a buttload of freaking money every year for this VLK licenses.
Yep.
And he was like pissed that because he was using Avast as his AV, scanned KMS Pico with Avast. It didn't show anything and didn't understand how that could be the thing. And I'm like, dude, it let you down in your ransomware. How do you think it's going to detect a freaking backdoor? When we ripped it apart, and no, don't get me wrong, I'm no expert at reverse malware analysis. I know enough to be freaking dangerous, but I know signatures. And Metasploit was built into this thing. So they had access to that entire infrastructure for about a year.
Wow. And they didn't abuse it. They didn't abuse it until they were ready. They were just living off the land, right?
Yep, they were just living. Avast never went off. They weren't watching their firewalls because the firewall was configured to at least alert on C2 infrastructure, but they weren't monitoring that log. But because the IT administrator wanted to take the easy route, it cost that company $3.2 million. And their insurance did not cover it all. I think it covered just under $1 million. And that was
wow.
Like,
I mean, that puts companies under. I mean, that's not a joke at all.
Mm-hmm.
And and my cat jumped on the screen, so apologies to me if you already said this. But why did they reach out to you, or was this just prospecting? How did you come about this to realize they were living?
They just found us on Google Ads. That's one of our primary metrics. So in our industry, we have two metrics we have three really. So you have word of mouth referrals. Just like any business.
Yep.
You have Google Ads, which is mostly like any other business, but we also have insurance carriers and breach counsel, which are specialized lawyers that handle cybersecurity incidents that will refer us and bring us in on matters. So there's 3 avenues there that we try to nurture as much as possible.
That's awesome. And, why don't we circle back to the agenda at hand? Oh, and I wanted to make sure Chuck's question got answered as well. Chuck had asked a little bit ago if you are using, I'll pull it up. So InfoGuard from the FBI, is this one of the resources that might be helpful for maybe? Okay.
I don't know. I've heard a lot about InfoGuard. I've been told that I need to look into it, but I haven't got there yet. That is on my roadmap to start ingesting into our CTI, but it's not our primary one now.
There we go. All right, let's get into some of this technical talk. Again, this is going to be pretty high level, and then we will dive a little bit into the configuration side of IR as well. But let's kick in. So you had started to broach a topic, if my cat is not going to block my view yet again, talking about who's doing the forensics. You did give a little bit of a hint. You've come across MSPs and various other ones trying to do some IR or some forensics activities. But does that ever help you, or is it just causing a little bit more noise?
That's causing a lot more noise, unfortunately, because they're not in forensics. You need to be able to have a clear line of, how best do I put it? You need to have almost like a snapshot of a workstation, so that way you can process it in a vacuum, collect all the logs, and parse through it quickly to see what's going on. There's multiple phases as part of an engagement. One is just pure discovery, which devices were potentially impacted by the incident. It doesn't have to be ransomware. It could be a business email compromise. It could be insider threat where your team member's getting ready to leave your organization, and we're just looking at one particular device, right? So a lot of times a MSP, unfortunately, will attempt to cover their tracks.
The
Where
MSP will try to shield their tracks.
yeah, because unfortunately they think that we are the firm that's going to call them out on the carpet and have everybody beat them with wiffle bats. And we're, to a degree, we can and may do that, but we are only going to do that, quite honestly, when there is gross negligence on the MSP side. I like to refer to it as you're letting the fox in the hen house to watch the hens. They were there to provide security and provide all these things, and now you want them to do that. And it kind of goes to your second slide here about the insurance companies doing forensics. Yep. Why in the world would you let your insurance company do it when their only interest is to potentially minimize paying out?
Right. They don't want to pay the claim. So if they're getting involved with the forensic side of things, they could just be negligent themselves or hide stuff. Is that fair to assume? Possible?
Yeah, it's very possible. I mean, if there's a reason to deny a claim. So, okay, let's take a step back. Most of our engagements are under attorney-client privilege. So when a new matter comes to us, whether it's from already a breach counsel or from Google Ads, we advise, hey, let's protect what we are just seeing and talking about and discovering, everything under attorney-client privilege. It is a product. It's a work product under attorney-client privilege. So, that helps protect a lot of the stuff we are seeing. So, that protects it also from the insurance carrier as well. It's like, an insurance, if you were filing your renewal and said you had MFA on everything, and come to find out through forensics that was not true because you had a non-MFA on an SSL VPN coming into your organization, then you are going to potentially get denied because the forensics firm already working for that insurance carrier is going to disclose that to the carrier.
Yeah, it just can't be done. And Bob's in here talking about it as well. He gave the same analogy as you, but you can't have the people involved or who have maybe incentive to ignore, right? They can't be involved with the process. So having a third party like Barricade or any other one sounds like the only way to handle it.
Yeah, I mean, not to go overly political, but
Chris is asking for you to keep pouring it on, so you may want to keep going.
What's up, Chris Young? So, anytime you see a police shooting, whether justified or unjustified, whatever the case is, Who are the police calling in to do the investigation? Are they doing it internally? Fuck no. Normally it's the SWAT or it's the state highway patrol or some sort of state municipality that's doing it. It is an external party that is conducting the investigation.
Yep.
Why would you do the same for your business?
Yep. Yep, absolutely. And keeping this high level for the audience who maybe isn't super familiar with the two differences, let's take IR and forensics as two separate topics. Can you just give a laydown for the land of the new listeners here?
So digital forensics is literally hunting with intensity because of a severe cyber security or cyber event, ransomware, business email compromise, things of that nature. And part of incident response is it can be very minimal. It is a tiered escalation. So it's like saying, you started off at a bicycle, but now you drive a car or a truck or whatever you want to, right? So an incident is just an alert. Hey, we have 15 failed logins for Chris Young on his workstation. That's an incident. Does it require digital forensics? No. It's just an alert that happened. You investigated it. You smack Chris Young around with a wiffle bat for a couple minutes. Everybody feels better. Chris is not going to do 15 failed logins, even when he gets locked out, and he knows better next time, right? Just to pick on the people that are here. But the digital forensics is a more in-depth, highly focused engagement to figure out what actually happened.
And Bob's comment here, I know he comes from a much larger, mature MSP. It sounds like, if I'm interpreting this comment correctly, they did do a lot of it internally, but hired a third party to verify that things were being handled correctly. Is this another strategy or approach that you would enjoy or appreciate?
We have been asked several times over the past couple of years, and we've done a couple of them. They will say, hey, we have a forensic report. We want you to perform your analysis on the report. Sure, no problem. Here's kind of what I'm going to say about that, though. Most of the time, we don't get access to the logs. Like, we'll ask for it. Like, hey,
Really?
we want to
How
verify.
can you do your job without access to the log? Sorry, this is my arrogance. I don't know how you can do your job.
I mean, most of the time it's in arbitration, and
Okay.
they're wanting somebody to see, are the claims in the forensic report legitimate, and does it make sense? Is this plausible? And I just make the case like, okay, if I'm standing here looking at you and I cover over my right eye, I don't see any threats coming from our right side. I could have a big giraffe coming at me. I don't know, right? So if that is a tactic that Bob and other folks are going to do, that's fine. But you're going to have to be willing to share those logs, or at least be able to make sure you're retaining those logs. So if further analysis of your report to verify the claims that you're making can be further analyzed, then it can be done. We've seen people just like, oh, we don't have logs anymore. You just have the report. I'm like, okay, how the hell do you want me to do this job? I mean, it sounds plausible what's on the report, but I don't know. I mean,
I think you're speaking directly to Justin on this one.
Justin works for Barricade, so he knows.
Okay. Shout out from the internal staff. Now that's surprising to me that you sometimes don't have the access you need, because when you're brought in, I would just assume they wanted you there. They're going to grant you the keys to the castle if that's what you need.
Yeah, most of the time the forensics, the original forensics is already done. We're in arbitration, or the client is in arbitration, and they want a verification, and the forensics firm only keeps like a 15, 30-day log, and arbitration could be 4 or 5 months down the road. So,
yeah. Now, I know you said you got your start as the MSP side. So I'll pull up, unfortunately. Well, your start, I mean, it sounds like you obviously didn't start there, but in breaking into the industry, you started there. But obviously, Senteon, focusing on configuration management and CIS, talk to us a little bit, not necessarily, it doesn't have to be exact configs, but the left of boom activities businesses might be doing. So the concept of system hardening as a whole. Obviously, you're coming in when it's post-incident, need to do some investigation, some hunting. But is there things you can talk about that would maybe make the hunt easier that you can do left of boom if it still happens?
Yeah. You want to go big screen real quick because this needs to be a very clear message.
Let's get that right back.
And I want to thank Zach for letting me go full Eric mode and allowing me to do this because normally I got to be politically correct or at least a toned version of me.
We may wear a hat that does say "Get hard, get secure," so you might get a care package after this webinar for being on, brother.
Increase your freaking logs and install sysmon.
Yep.
If most of the time, business email compromise, you will know about it for pretty quickly within 15 to 30 days because most of the time BECs have two flavors. They either are doing trying to pivot to another mailbox or whatever, so they're doing the Dropbox links and all this other stuff. But the other ones that are looking for financial for the changing of the wiring instructions are in there for a lot longer. So making sure you have proper log history. If the platform you're using, whether it's Windows, Linux, Mac,
Sure.
if you don't have the capability of increasing the local storage of your logging capability, for dear Lord, get a freaking SIM or a syslog server that we can go look at. It makes it very, very hard to do forensics when you don't have the information, right? It's I'll keep going back to the cops and doing traffic, and
Sure.
I always go back to because it's the easiest thing to remember or do an analysis. Like if you've been in a car accident, you had a green light, somebody came over and into you, but you're like, I slammed on my brakes and I tried to avoid, but there's no damn skid marks, you have no proof. The same thing. There's no logs. I can't prove yes, no, or in between. So I'm like, and when it comes down to it, when it comes to forensic reporting, and especially when we are in a legal room or in a courtroom, we can only state fact. We cannot say every once in a while we'll get the latitude to say the forensics makes me believe X, Y, and Z happened, but 99% of the time we don't get that latitude. Like we could just say either yes, the forensics clearly said, or we have no forensic evidence to support or deny that claim.
It's terrifying. And Austin has a question here. I don't know if you have a random number that comes to mind, right? Because obviously the event log is some of these system configurations. CIS, which is what we follow, has its own recommendations, which I think security event logs are recommended at 197,000 kilobytes from CIS. But also for the audience, keeping this high level, want you to do two things. One, definitely respond to this question, but I also want to shout out that there are multiple categories of the event log sizes. So security, application, and there's two other ones. There's 4 total, but I'm on the spot and I can't think of them. But
you have application, security, system, and
system. Yep.
I forget the fourth one. But you also have Crimson logs, which is all the stuff underneath it, right?
Yep. And the point I want to make there is like there's more than just one place that you need to configure. So when you look at these and you increase the size, you do need to make sure you're increasing the size uniformly or to the appropriate standard for each category. Yep. So definitely would love a response to this. And then I'm gonna come back and ask a few questions about audit pool and some of the stuff I've seen and see what you think about that. But toss some recommendations here.
I don't have enough whiskey around me.
It is 2:00 on a Friday. I think we're all right. You might want to find some 5-minute intermission.
Honestly, what I would take a look at how busy your logs are. I don't want to say a certain size because every organization and every device is different depending on the workload and the activity that are on it. But whatever size you need to get to have at least 30 days of logs.
Okay.
Please.
30 days actually I is lower than I thought it would be. So let's actually take a minute before we switch topics. Talk about log retention, and I'll give one of our own partners a shout out here. So Keenan from NewQuest IT, he is one of the most log retention heavy partners that we have. So he did increase the size from even what CIS recommended, but he also has a backup process to where all the event logs would then go, I believe, to like cold storage or something. So talk to us a little bit about log retention. You just said at minimum 30 days, but are there some best practices you can share with the audience?
I don't know about best practices, to be honest with you. And the only reason I say 30 days is because 9 times out of 10, the way, especially when it comes to a ransomware situation, there's multi tiers of the process of this. We have somebody who initially compromised your network, whether it's firewall, an RDP, what I coin ransomware deployment protocol, SSH, FT, whatever the protocol is, um, and they are called the initial access broker. Right.
Okay.
So they get access. They're going to try to do lateral movement inside the environment because the more data that they collect, the more endpoints they collect, they can sell it off on the dark web. Acura and there's one other one that's known for it, but it's escaping my mind at the moment. But they love buying from initial access brokers because they've already got a foothold in the environment, right? So, making sure
One,
you have at least 30 days so that way we can hopefully detect the IAB, what we call IAB, initial access broker, to be able to see the full picture, like how much dwell time did they really have, right? Where did the initial or the IAB, steal off your browser data as they were going through your network before selling it off to the threat actor? Like, they're in it for the money as well. So like they could be double, triple, and quadruple dipping. Like,
yep,
hey, we selling off this access, but we have all this other juicy data, and
yep.
we're going to do it over here and over here, and you
So,
know,
so this juicy data you're talking about, it has value. That's very easy and understood. Now, the follow up here, as Senteon has gotten into Chrome, Edge, Firefox hardening, a lot of these policies are simply reg keys that can be changed, and you don't necessarily need a platform like Senteon to do it. Of course, we'll automate it, make it a little easier, but disabling autofill, not allowing websites to query for payments. There's various reg keys built into your browsers and any application for that matter. Well, settings in any application, but browser has the reg keys available, and you can minimize a lot of what people are buying, right? It's not just about having an incident. It is just simply the data and how it's stored or if it's allowed to be stored.
hmm Yeah, so I mean, before we go into that one, I'll circle back to our previous ones. Like, what do you do about the log retention? I mentioned them
Yep.
before, just to rekey that one. A syslog server. If that's pure just data retention, like you're just keeping logs in a non-SIM format, but you're just keeping syslogs for everything in a syslog server. So, if you have that availability, to keep it 6 months, that'd be awesome, right?
Awesome.
Most forensic cases don't need that. The only time we really see that is if an APT is actually in your environment and they're in there for a really long time, because you're a highly targeted organization, or it's an insider threat, right? Like the employee has been trying to siphon off intellectual property or
Yeah.
IP from your organization for their new company for the past 3 months,
Which
type
would
of thing.
never happen.
No, never. Um, so just to put a bow on that one. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go crazy with like a 1 year or over for
Okay.
that, but I mean, at least go with what you can,
Really
right?
try to get to that multi-month period at minimum. We're looking 30
Mhm.
days just as a best practice. And of course, increasing the event log size, which is again, another reg key. So, and then to share context on why I brought up the beautiful audit pool file within good old Microsoft, we onboard a lot of MSP partners, and I would say at least one, whether it's internal to their MSP or one of their clients, we constantly find at least one device, whether it's a server or workstation, that has all the audit pool settings set to no auditing. Now, educate me here. One, every single time I point that out to our prospects or partners, they're not aware of it. But two, many of them do have a SIM and their SIM is working, it's ingesting data. How important are these audit pools policies to an incident, to a SIM? Like, why are they set to no auditing? Or, what are they missing out rather?
All right, everybody, huddle in for a second. Microsoft by design is insecure as shit.
No, whoa, shh.
And honestly, I don't know why they do it. I really don't.
Especially
You
the
know,
ones that don't impact the end client experience.
you're not increasing the log retention. You're not increasing the log size, and impacting a lot of log retention just by enabling it, right? And I go back to the traffic accident that I mentioned a minute ago. There was no skid marks on the pavement, so we don't have any proof of whether it was an allowed or disallowed action. Um, even something that's PowerShell logging, most
Yep.
people don't turn that on either, and that could be a
Oh, the
very big.
PowerShell transcription. It's absolutely wild. Like that's a simple setting you can turn on. And when we turn that on for some partners, I'm not as spicy as you, so I won't use company names, but we will call out other vendors that use a lot more PowerShell than you actually realize. And then once we start documenting it and tracking the logs, the MSP is like, this is a Senteon bug. Why is it used? I'm like, no, we're notifying you of the other vendors in your stack using a bunch of PowerShell without you knowing it.
You want the quickest way for MSPs to brick their RMM tool? You want to take a guess?
I'm nervous to take a guess because this is a spicy button for you, as what Chuck is pointing out here.
Go in your environment and do two things. Hard disable by GPO or Intune or whatever, PowerShell version 2. And the second one, only allow and enforce this. Enforce this. Not just set it, but enforce it to disallow unsigned PowerShell command or scripts. You will brick your RMM. You want to know why? Because your RMM tool and most of the MSP tools, unfortunately, create the PS1 file at the time of execution. And they're not even tying it back to themselves as self-signed. It's just some random PS1 file. Put what on the shirt?
The comment, I think, about the attack.
I have to go back and see what I said.
Wouldn't that be funny if we ended up doing that as a little demonstration? Not right now, but maybe a follow-up. But no, it's wild to see, and that is one of the reasons, again, like our point of view. And it's interesting you said enforce. Why did you emphasize that so much? Aren't GPOs and Intune enforcing by default if you have it set? Or
no, it's all right.
How do you? And this is a Senteon plug to be fully transparent. Like, how do you enforce if you don't have a Senteon, Eric?
I mean, you can enforce it by GPO, but we go back to the traffic analogy, right? You have 3 colors, unless you're colorblind and you see.
Oh, here's what was being put on a shirt. There you go.
Microsoft is insecure as shit, comma, by design. So going back to the traffic analogy, you have control enforcement, right? You're enforcing the permission or caution and stop of a 4-way intersection, right? A traffic signal. You even have I used to do this stuff there was a time I was an industrial electrician and we did a lot of traffic control stuff. Do you know why there's literally 2 traffic lights, even if you only have 1 lane? We're going to go down different rabbit holes.
It'd be a backup. One fails, you still have the other? Or? Okay, there you go.
Exactly. So you're trying to enforce the control. See? How else do you force the control? You have cops sitting on the side of the road running for red lighters.
Are you making a layered approach in a traffic environment?
I told you, I go back to traffic.
A hell of a metaphor.
But you see the connection, right?
Yes, I do.
Like I said, I can pivot this all the time back to traffic scenarios. And I've been asked, have you been a cop? No, I just pay attention. But same thing with your logs. You're turning on red light, green light, allowed, disallowed, right? But you can still bypass that control. Enforcing it
Yep.
mandates either the allow or disallow, not just the logging and the bypassing. That notice that you get saying you're not allowed to do said perform action on your device is because of an enforcement
Yep.
policy, not a logging policy.
Yep. And what we've seen from the Microsoft side, which, shocking, but when we're doing this at the Intune level, and hopefully my screen says connection lost. So hopefully I'm still here, but
You're hearing me.
you just hear me. All right, there we go. So what we see when you're doing these policies, even with group policy, Microsoft Intune, when you set those target values, they will be that point in time. And then they have this mysterious black box called a 90-minute sync that allegedly it will then be enforced again. I can't confirm or deny if that is actually true or not. But, Senteon goes in, we are a remediation tool, right? So we're making 500 some reg key changes on the machine level, not the Intune level. And we would all be shocked at how little Microsoft even notices that the machine level changed. So that level of enforcement is why I kind of pressed you. How are you even enforcing? And you answered, obviously answered exactly correctly. It's layered of ways to enforce because Microsoft alone isn't really enforcing anything.
Mm-mm. No, they're just trying to give you a platform to be able to utilize. And, even the Sysmon, which is made by Microsoft Sysinternals, is not even included. But yeah, they want to go ahead and do random screen
I didn't know that wasn't
captures,
included.
aka, yeah, you got to install it, and then you got to configure it. And there's like two well-renowned open source configs on GitHub that we kind of reference back and forth sometimes, just to help tone down the noise on Sysmon.
Yep.
And we can have a whole talk and just deep dive on that at
We
one
might
time.
just do a webinar on Sysmon because I'm not at all an expert in it. I've seen it. I've had it pulled up by my devs and even some partners going a little bit closer in their due diligence of us, but I haven't actually had a whole experience. So maybe.
Well, here we go, Zach.
Oh.
Here we go. So we'll do one webinar because I'm almost done. I'm getting ready to release it. But if you promise me we'll do it, we'll do it.
On time.
Don't get me started. I will start making flights in a minute and find that freaking U-Haul.
I'll just drive somewhere new. You can't find me. I'll take my whole house somewhere.
But we can go through and showcase, and I'll send it over to you ahead of time, a PowerShell script to configure logs in a proper way and increase the logs and install Sysmon. So you're doing some preemptive work for logging. So that could be one, and we can give that out as an open resource.
Yep.
And then the second one, I just completely shit the bed and lost my train of thought. But what were we just talking about? Yeah.
Lost it.
Yeah. What was the second thing we were just talking about just now?
Live on air, freeze, brain fart.
Yeah. It'll come back to me in a minute.
Yeah, but we'll do those. We'll do at least the one, and we'll think of the other one. We were just talking about Sysmon, and I haven't had a deep dive. I've had partners pull it up in front of me to show it while Senteon's doing remediation. A lot of talk about enforcement. I talked about you really emphasized layered enforcement, while I was pointing out that Microsoft alone really doesn't enforce. Anything coming back?
Yeah, back when I was running my MSP, we use Lab when it was really called LabTech. Greg Burke was literally installing it on a server as part of your implementation, like old school shit. And I don't know if Automate, which is what LabTech is called now, well, I almost refuse to call it that, but maybe that's why they changed the name, because they're destroying the freaking product. Anyway, but back then, your RMM tool would literally do a 1 minute or 5 minute, I forget which one, interval check-in, and you could be able to say, okay, is this registry key set? Nope. Reset it.
Yep.
Bring it back into compliance, right? And help enforce those rules, because you'll be surprised how many Windows updates, third-party applications, bloatware, whatever, will make the most stupidest changes to your registry environment.
You say You say bloatware, Eric. Senteon is pretty deep into the things changing reg keys without approval, and there's certain notable vendors, security vendors that will change ASR rules and never let Microsoft know.
And they have no point in doing it either. Like,
None.
why on God's green earth? This gives you no additional functionality or anything to your product. Why the f are you touching this freaking even this Hive class to begin with, let alone the registry key itself?
How often are you finding beautiful user rights assignments with random ass applications just having, access this computer from the network just fully accessible or act as part of the operating system? These are real findings we see at the machine level for the URAs, and they're just input by I say reputable, but very prominent vendors. It's just, yeah, they're going to give themselves more access, even though it runs just fine after Senteon removes it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes me want to play in traffic.
Now, I mean, diving into this, things changing reg keys, applications, Windows updates is a big offender of changing their own reg keys and not putting them back. But I guess I'll at least share the
Or
slides.
even saying, hey, here's a recommendation for mitigation until we apply a patch, and then their patch doesn't even make that change or check to see if that reg key was made for mitigation to remove it later. Yay,
Yep.
micro crap.
Yeah, we're in the browser world. It's the documentation's even a little less. But we've talked a lot about logs, log storage. I don't know if we dove into enough. Why are they so critical from an investigative point of view? Like, is that truly like, the blood spatter for forensics? Like, is that truly the trail of the how to find people? Like, it still blows my mind you're not given the keys to the castle every single time. Like, how do you leverage the logs personally? I can give a more pointed question if you want.
Yeah, because I'm trying to figure out what I can and cannot say.
Got it. Let me make it scoped back towards Senteon then. So when we see reg keys get removed, changed, added, we're associating the user that was signed in while the change happened, the timestamp of when it happened. This could be SMB1 going from disabled to enabled. This could be a URA went from not there to there, right? How valuable is that point in time, which machine, which setting, which reg key from a forensics point of view when it changes?
From a high level, most of the time, not
Okay.
very impactful. Because not a lot of times we have a time window. Make sure I'm in frame. A time window, a slice of the pie, so to speak, that we are hyper focused on. Right. Let's just say, and its case came in today. They were originally impacted, say, the 11th of this month, and so we're going to go from typically 15 days back and try to
Okay.
see, can we figure out what happened in that 15 days, or do we need to go further? And first off, we're doing a complete scan with some tools that we use, and see what devices are impacted, what are not, and see if we can gain insight on those key devices quickly within that 15 days of what's going on. There are reg keys that are made by OpenSSH,
Yep.
PS exec, saying, hey, we were allowed to, the user accept the EULA, things of that nature that you don't typically see. You'll see it pretty early on in an IT admin environment, but every day, Jill over in HR is not going to run PS exec. So the ability to be able to do that is a key indicator of what may be going on.
I guess, and maybe I'm looking at more, point of entry, say initial access. Like, do
Firewall.
you, do you find reg keys change to be associated with where maybe the point of entry was?
Well, to be fair, there's no such thing as reg keys on a firewall. But
Oh, the
I get your,
configurations of it on,
yeah,
right? You can
yeah.
turn, there's, if
So
inbound connections are just a blank reg key after it was enforced, that's pretty sus.
yeah, a lot of times in a firewall, will depending on the firewall in the investigation, there is previous configs in there that you can be able to roll back to.
Mhm.
right? So we'll take most of the time when you set a firewall up, unless there's a reason to make a policy change, there's not many policy changes done. So they'll do a snapshot of that config before doing firmware or OS updates to that firewall. So we'll compare, the previous one or two against the current state. But most of the time, there's nothing there because
Okay.
they just brute forced a username password. Unfortunately, and this is to go back to the SIM logging question into this one, most firewalls don't log anything past 2 hours. So again, having a syslog server to collect and store that data for at least 30 days will give us some much insight on what actually happened. How do they potentially get into the environment to begin with? Because
Wow.
if without those, we don't have that information. We may
Yeah.
see, they got in. We see in the forensic logs on, Zach's computer, the RDP connection potentially coming from either remote location, depending on the
Yep.
firewall and the natting rules. We may see the external, we may only see that firewall. So, you know, again, being able to export to an external syslog server for at least 30 days will help out an investigation tremendously.
Yeah, and I guess tying it back to even like what I'm, and I'll just share what I'm seeing in the cyber insurance world, and how deep are you in the CMMC and the regulated space like that? Pretty, yep. So what we're seeing, and to be transparent, our partners are Beltex and DataStream Cyber Insurance for our insurance quotes, if you will. So one of the things that they're looking for when an incident is a file's claimed and whatnot is actually being able to show the change history of your baseline. So really the broadness of the scope of my question was like, if you were looking at the CIS recommendations, which is like 500 some on each workstation, 500 on a server, and 100 on a browser, right? All of these reg keys, I'm really trying to fine tune. Like you mentioned, you have the image prior, and then you do 2 weeks after, and you manually look at the differences. If there was a way, I mean, I guess, why are insurance and regulators caring about the time of a reg key change if you were kind of saying it doesn't matter too much from the IR forensics? Or
So the CMMC side of thing is a control platform, right? You are proving you are adhering to security, um, a control in a security framework. Okay.
okay,
So when you make that reg key or whatever change, you're falling out of compliance with that framework. We're there to investigate an incident. We're not. We're honestly not worried about what security framework you're compliant to. What nor are we looking to, you know, um, go out and start tweeting about it and
right,
saying, "Hey, Bob Jones over here is not compliant like they're supposed to be." It's really not a purpose. We're there to hunt evil, investigate how did somebody potentially get in, did they take data, and who do you need to potentially notify about a cybersecurity incident? I mean, it's a little bit more nuanced to that, but we're not there. We're not there to throw the IT under the bus unless, again,
sure,
they're gross negligence. Like they clearly effed up here. Um, we had cases where we went through their emails and they were communicating with the threat actor, getting paid to give them access, right? I mean, that kind of stuff's like,
that's
yeah,
pretty
we need
fucked
to have
up.
a different kind of conversation here, guys. Um, you know, Jan over here gave away the keys of the kingdom, and here's the proof. So we need to have a frank discussion about this. But 9 times out of 10, we're not there for that, right? We're there for an incident, and that's what it's about. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we do get more into it if an organization keeps us around or wants to have us on an incident response retainer. Then we are much more nuanced and much more in the weeds on that type of discussion.
Because
But
you're ahead of time.
we're purely a advisor. You
Okay.
know, um, we'll help assist the organization if they need help implementing the framework and stuff like that to get there. But we're not an auditor. We're not C3 PAO. 3 P A O. We're not doing all that stuff, right? But um, you know, 3 P A O. 3 We're not doing all that stuff, right? But um, you know, 3 P A O. 3 We're not doing all that stuff, right? But um, you know, 3 P A O. 3 We're not doing all that stuff, right? But you know, we always talk about, and shameless plug is, Barricade's literal mission is to help companies be more secure tomorrow than they are today.
Yep.
And anything that we can be able to do with that is great. So,
No, that makes sense. And in our pre-interview, when we were kind of deciding, like, what's a good fit for the topic, you did share, you're not there to get anyone in trouble, but quite literally, timing of the next slide is talking about IR is personal, but it shouldn't be.
mhm.
You kind of shared, like, it's a very emotional heavy environment you're usually walking into. People are, fearful for their job, their security, right? They're wondering who's going to be at fault, and you have to navigate very choppy waters, if you will, on how to stay professional, not put blame,
Mhm.
and not make people feel bad. How do you handle that at Barricade? Do you like interview everyone separately, determine who's involved? How do you keep it neutral?
I play as an unlicensed therapist mixed with Sesame Street. And the reason I say that is, again, like I mentioned before, I believe that the internal IT most of the time looks at us as the bad guys because we're going to uncover their dirty little secrets. And again, I don't care if you're on the internet looking at adult material. I really don't care. Are we going to report it to the owner? More than likely not. Um, you know, unless that's how, you're on a questionable adult site and that's how the malware got there, then we may have to say something, right? I'm in a different topic, but I mean, we're not there to make you lose your job. Um, is a and we got to be like all happy to. We got to be professional. Like, look,
Yeah.
we're here just to investigate the matter. That's all we're doing. We don't ever make assumptions, right? Every case is different. Um, Making sure you go in with no perceived assumptions of the matter, the business, the threat actor, whatever, and be able to do what you need to do. On the therapy side, you know, most of our clients are small to medium businesses. They're under 5,000 employees. Most of them are under 3 and 2,000 employees. Um, and yeah, just echoing exactly what I said. It's like almost I'm teaching them. But
Hell of a mentor.
I, I was actually thinking about it earlier today, and there's much more mentoring I need to do with my team. But I'm sorry. Um,
Hey, dude,
but
entrepreneur. I mean, we could do a whole episode on entrepreneurship and bandwidth, and I know I got a couple of my team members there, and I had to just yesterday flying home from Pittsburgh, right? I was behind on something I owed them, had to work on the plane, and it's tough. I mean, ownership is no joke.
yeah, a couple of years ago, we had going back to the therapy side. We had a was on a call with a client, and like he he was in the ERP, so they did like cloud hosted financial platform. Um, and we were on a call, just doing a daily brief, and all of a sudden you just see the dude doing this number, and you hear a thud, and I'm like, hold on, we had legal, we had everybody on the line. I'm like, everybody, time out for a second, and I called out to him a couple times, um, and he didn't answer, so we had to stop the beating. I had to call 911. The homeboy unfortunately had a stroke.
Nightmare.
Like he,
Wow.
yeah, he was. His stress level was so high, and unfortunately, and I get why they do it, but unfortunately, this they business owners will take this as a personal attack on them. You know, anybody who's an entrepreneur and has or even worked with a small business since the early foundations, you feel like your blood, sweat, and tears have gone into that company. You feel vested. You like it's part of your family, your baby, right? And to see everything potentially go away because of a mistake of a configuration file. It literally,
It,
right?
it really is that single
That
point of
particular
entry.
That's it. They were. It was early, or it was toward the later COVID days, but they were having a problem with a remote user getting in on the VPN. Like, most of their devices were Mac, and they were trying to get a Windows user to get remote access so they can get in, and they
Sure.
were just having a hell of a time. Like, they spent like 2 weeks on, it, and they're like, you know what, F it. We're going to open up RDP. We're going to lock it down to this user's IP address, and we're putting some control on it. We're putting I can't remember. I want to say they were using Cisco Duo for that VM that they were coming into.
They had
But they
complementary. End of the day, they had complementary controls in place. It
Yeah,
was an
exactly.
active decision.
They were doing what they thought they can do to get the user started and being able to work without them sitting around with their thumb up their butt for the past 2 weeks, until they had a chance to get with support teams and figure out what's going on. They accidentally inverted the rule, blocking
Blocking.
the end user's IP address and opening it up to the world, and invited a whole bunch of new friends to the party.
Yep.
So, literally human error. He thought everything was gone. He thought his business was done. He was going to be sued to oblivion because he was just running an LLC, just all this stuff. And they're like, they're going to breach the corporate veil. They're going to, I'm done. Right. And they were running an ERP solution.
Sure.
So, the amount of servers that were impacted and client data that was impacted could have been.
So, but yeah, I mean, you have to go in there and obviously you have to maintain those emotions. I mean, going back to kind of the point of this, like that's how high these stress levels can get. And you are almost not solely, but I mean, part of your job is to keep things balanced, which I mean, that's a skill.
Mm-hmm.
That's not just something you wake up and do. All right, let's see. We're right at the hour. What other topics we got, or we should save them for the next one?
Dude, I can go long if you want. Insert adult topic here. Or
You're always great. I mean, we can do a little forensics post-mortem, some story on the lessons. I mean, that's kind of what of it. There's actually one question I want to circle back to.
Sure.
You did talk about gross negligence, and you gave a very extreme example. At the time I was thinking it was extreme. I can't even recall it right now, but it was something.
The KMS Pico?
Yeah, they intentionally were accepting money or giving credit. Like obviously, like they were effectively the point of failure. A lot of partners that I work with already have some type of vulnerability management tool, and scoping it again back to configurations in Senteon. Many of them have the Nessus scan, or they know the CIS policy recommendations, and they have all these red marks. I mean, some MSPs will even leverage these reports to prospect new business. Look at what your MSP currently is not doing, right? So all of these scans that the MSPs are running today, whether it's to generate new business or look at what's vulnerable, many of the times after running it, they don't ever actually turn red from green, right? Senteon's automating this, and when I get there, I always expect things to be a little bit more configured than they are. When they have these reports before Senteon's involved, when they have all these red marks and they know their baselines are not set, is that negligence that they're not actively trying to fix it?
That depends. Depends on the engagement from the MSP IT provider. If they are just providing like a T&M, time and materials engagement, then no.
Okay.
If they're doing VAR or whatever, they're just reselling some products, and no. But if they are selling a cybersecurity package of sorts, then yes, in my humble opinion. They knew about the vulnerabilities. They
They
provided
have the
this.
scans. There's timestamps on it. Mm-hmm.
As much as I want to trash those scams, because literally, there is just a bunch of noise. It's not the proper way to go through it, because even the MSPs looking at it, it's like, I don't know where to start. Most vulnerability platforms are just complete effing garbage. Because the one thing I learned early in my pen testing days is any good true red team engagement requires 2 reports. One for the CISO, 1 or 2 pages
Yeah.
to show severity of different things, and what is the most critical, in our opinion, that you should patch, right? And then the other one's just a complete technical mind
Yep.
dump.
Multiple
know?
pages.
Yeah.
Dozens.
So,
Yep.
because you're gonna have multiple people in the room when you're doing your debrief or on a Zoom, and like, CISOs, here's your review. We'll go through that. Technical people, here's my mind dump. Right? Here's all the screenshots. Here's all the everything. That was always the best way of doing it, and MSPs are missing the mark on that because they're like, ha ha ha, I just printed out 5,000 effing pages of a Nessus scan, and we are looking so awesome right now. Look,
We have so much information. No one else can do this.
and again, I don't want to get overly political on here, but you can look at the federal government doing the same shit, right? I mean, everybody wants to tout themselves as the industry leader because they can generate and kill a forest for a report that is literal noise when you don't know how to properly go through and prioritize the vulnerabilities. Like, just because you have, let's just say hypothetically, you have 500 CVEs impacting your environment right now. Which ones are the ones that you got to start working on patching this week?
Yeah, which one's truly applied directly to my scope, directly to whatever I have, right?
Yeah, I mean, just because it's a CVE 10 or CVSF 10,
Yep.
it's a CVS 10 in a certain unique pie in the sky situation that's probably not going to happen in your environment, and that's why EPSS was invented and really talked about. And so being able to prioritize true CVEs and not just knowing to patch this CVE, we got to patch this. 9 times out of effing 10, there's more things you've got to do. There's additional reg keys that you've got to make that thing done. We talked about it very recently. Microsoft's infinite solution to fix a vulnerability is every Windows OS, whether you're running IIS or not, you have inetpub in the root of your damn computer. And guess what? If you delete it,
Just in
the
case.
latest roll-up re-puts it in there. It's a way to ensure that the freaking their mitigation is done. Print Nightmare, I don't think has ever been fully resolved either. Anyway, I go on soapbox for 3 days. Here we go.
No, I mean, Print Nightmare, the reg key settings for that with disabling print spiller is one we support, and we have seen that magically drift, right? Why is it getting erased, right? So this is the whole thing that you absolutely need to understand is there is no enforcement, and the traffic light scenario, their traffic intersection, right? Multiple layers of ways to enforce it, right? Obviously, there's platforms, plugging ourselves again, that help with this, but there are things you can do without spending a dollar, right? It is more manual, but you got to have the layered enforcement. And I want to circle back. Dan, I think, just joined the call. A good friend. I met him over at Write a Boom. To kind of put a bow on the event log conversation, we talked a lot of aspects, but we never talked about overlogging. If you were to just turn event log storage to whatever mythical maximum, that could probably DOS your system, no?
If you're not careful about how big you make your logs, then it could bring your system to crawl. Because I mean, let's be honest, a lot of workstations, they only have a 250 gig SSD drive, right? So, by the time you install all your Office applications, your Adobe applications, this and that, you killed half your hard drive, right? And so you don't want to go overboard. That's why, having an external logging, installing WinBeats or something like that to push those logs off premise is highly recommended. Is there a thing of overlogging? Yes, when the data is no longer relevant, right? So, going back to the federal government a little bit, IRS recommends, I believe still, you keep your personal taxes for 7 years, right? Anything older than 7, they don't care about. They're not going to come after you about, supposedly. So taking that mindset to your logs, like, how long do you and your organization really need to keep your logs? I would willing to wager anywhere between the 3 to 6 month time frame is an acceptable amount. Anything more, I don't know. I mean, most organizations, 2 or 3 weeks, really. It just
Yeah.
depends. Like, I guess what your business does as well. Um, if you are in the financial, then I would strongly recommend more to the 4 to 6 mark. If you're in construction, you know, maybe 2 months, maybe a month. Again, go back with the CVE. It really depends and applies to your specific business.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it, man. I had some other points diving into configs, but I think all our stories really hit my follow up points. So I think we're at a point where we need to organize the next 2, 3, 4 episodes. But I do want to give you a chance if there's any closing thoughts or anything you want to share on just kind of the topic or scope today, and then we'll get a little maybe more technical next session.
Sure. I mean, the only thing I want to say is, if you ever have an incident, go reach out our schedule call or whatever. Just go to recoverfromransomware.com. It goes to our landing page. My team's number, I'm available 24/7. The one thing I want people, I mentioned this earlier, and what I'm trying to challenge people this year to do, and literally take our mission statement. How in the hell can we make this company more secure tomorrow than we are today? Take that, move forward. If you have questions, reach out to Senteon, reach out to Barricade, reach out to your partners about how to do that. Find the vendors.
There's always one more setting.
And you can go too overboard on security. Make sure security and business operations meet. There is a term called acceptable exclusions. Know what they are, and being able to. I'll go back to the court analogy a little bit. When you're in and you're doing your jury selection, you only have so many exclusions and being able to excuse potential jurors. Take that same mindset with acceptable exclusions. We're only allowing ourselves 10 acceptable or 20 or whatever it is. But no, this is our magic number. Before you even go into it, it's like, then don't say no, except that there's going to be at least.
It always is.
So, yeah.
And extending on that too, Senteon looking at about 500 reg keys across the OS, another 100 on the browser, right? On average, we're seeing anywhere from 20 to 30 different accepted risks. The piece I'll also emphasize here, and obviously this, Eric, but when you do this, make sure you document the reason for the exclusion, especially if you're in a regulated space, because they're going to use your engineer's time to understand why it's there. And if you document it, you're not going to have to figure out who made the exclusion in the first place. Because if you don't have it documented, you probably don't have good change management either. But try your best to document those exclusions and be ready, because they will ask, right? That's the whole point of it. But all right, and I guess I should have showed the final slide, a little bit tout on what's coming up. So we will be doing more sessions here. We're going to do something sounds like a little bit of a session webinar series. And I will be bringing Eric Taylor and Chris Lair onto a panel. That was one of the early stage ideas. So both by my two closest friends in the IR and forensic space, both with similar outcome views and some debatable points. So excited for that one. And Barricade will be sponsoring the Wild West Hacking Fest. And then Senteon will be heading over to Nashville for ChannelCon hosted by GTIA. And before that, we're actually doing a webinar with our friends over at Cavello on, actually a topic we talked about here, vulnerability management programs. They being built to fail, likely because of lack of prioritization. But we'll dive into those topics. And like Eric said, you can reach out to his website there listed in the bottom right. Sign up for Senteon to get some free assessments. But thank you, everyone, for joining the session. A lot more to come.
Everybody.